The November rain fell relentlessly against the tall windows of the Velvet Room, creating rivulets that distorted the glowing Manhattan skyline beyond. Elena Martinez moved gracefully between tables, her black uniform pristine despite the grueling 6-hour shift already behind her. At 23, she had mastered the art of becoming invisible, essential in a restaurant where the wealthy discussed matters they believed were beneath the notice of those who served them. "Table 7 needs another bottle of the Chateau Margaux," whispered James, the senior waiter, as he passed her in the narrow corridor leading to the kitchen. His eyes held a warning she'd learned to recognize. "The Constantine party. Be professional, keep your head down, and whatever you do, don't make eye contact." Elena nodded, her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun that emphasized the exhaustion shadowing her brown eyes. 3 jobs: the Velvet Room, morning shifts at a cafe in Brooklyn, weekend tutoring, all to keep pace with her younger brother's medical bills. Carlos was only 19, diagnosed with a rare heart condition 2 years ago. Every shift, every tip, every aching step brought her closer to the next payment, the next treatment, the next hope that he might live a normal life. She collected the wine bottle from the temperature-controlled cabinet, checking the label twice. $15,000 per bottle, more than she earned in 3 months. The thought didn't make her bitter anymore, just tired. The private dining room occupied the entire northeast corner of the restaurant's 2nd floor. Through the frosted glass doors, Elena could see shadows moving, hear the low rumble of masculine voices punctuated by occasional laughter. She knocked softly, waited for the acknowledgement, then entered. The room fell silent as she stepped inside. 7 men sat around an oval table made of dark mahogany, its surface reflecting the warm glow of the crystal chandelier overhead. The air smelled of expensive cologne, aged wine, and something else, something Elena couldn't quite name but instinctively recognized as power. These weren't just wealthy men. These were men who shaped the city beyond these walls, who made decisions that rippled through thousands of lives. At the head of the table sat Victor Constantine. Elena had seen him before, of course. He dined at the Velvet Room monthly, always in this same private room, always surrounded by the same serious-faced men in tailored suits. But she'd never served him directly, never stood close enough to feel the weight of his presence. He was 40, though he carried his years with a confidence that made age irrelevant. His dark hair was touched with gray at the temples, perfectly styled. His suit was charcoal gray, fitted so precisely it must have been custom-made, but it was his eyes that caught her attention. Ice blue, sharp, assessing everything with the intensity of a man who missed nothing and forgot less. "The Margaux," she said softly, approaching the table. Her hands remained steady as she presented the bottle, though her heart hammered against her ribs. Victor didn't look up immediately. He was studying a document spread before him, his expression focused. The other men watched him, waiting as if his reaction would dictate their own. "Leave it," one of the other men said dismissively, a heavy-set man with a thick Brooklyn accent. "We'll pour it ourselves." Elena placed the bottle on the sideboard and turned to leave, relief flooding through her. Almost safe, almost invisible again. "Wait," Victor's voice stopped her mid-step. It wasn't loud, but it carried absolute authority, the kind of voice that expected obedience and received it. She turned slowly. "Sir?" He looked up then, and the full force of his attention landed on her like a physical weight. For 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours, he studied her face. Elena forced herself not to look away, not to show fear, even as every instinct screamed at her to flee. "You work here often?" he asked. 5 nights a week, sir. 2 years now." "Observant?" The question surprised her. "I try to be, sir." A slight smile touched his lips, though it didn't reach his eyes. He lifted the document he'd been studying, a spreadsheet covered in numbers and calculations, and held it toward her. "Then perhaps you can settle a debate. I've told these gentlemen there's an error in these financial projections. They insist I'm wrong. What do you think?" The other men shifted in their seats. The heavy-set one laughed outright. "Victor, she's a waitress. What would she know about international finance?" "Maybe nothing," Victor replied, his gaze never leaving Elena's face. "Or maybe she sees what you don't. Fresh eyes often catch what experienced ones miss." Elena's mind raced. This was a test, though she couldn't understand why or what it meant. Refuse, and she'd insult him. Not wise with a man like Victor Constantine. Accept, and she'd make a fool of herself in front of these powerful men. But then she thought of Carlos, lying in a hospital bed in Queens. waiting for his next treatment. She thought of the tutoring she did on weekends, helping high school students with mathematics and accounting. She thought of the business degree she'd abandoned after her father's death, when keeping her family afloat became more important than her own dreams. "May I see it, sir?" The room erupted in low chuckles. One man whispered something to his neighbor. Another shook his head, already dismissing her. Victor stood, walked around the table, and handed her the document. "Take your time," he said quietly. "There's no rush." Elena accepted the papers with steady hands, though her pulse thundered in her ears. The restaurant sounds faded, the clink of silverware, the murmur of conversation from the main dining room, even the rain against the windows. Everything narrowed to the numbers before her. It was a complex spreadsheet, tracking investments across multiple international markets, currencies, conversion rates, projected returns, risk assessments, the kind of analysis that would typically require specialized software and hours of review. But Elena had always possessed an unusual gift with numbers. They spoke to her in ways words sometimes didn't, forming patterns and relationships that seemed obvious once she saw them. Her father had called it her mathematician's eye, the ability to spot inconsistencies, to sense when something didn't align with the internal logic of a calculation. She scanned the first page. Real estate investments in Miami, London, Tokyo. The numbers flowed correctly, each calculation following logically from the previous one. The second page covered currency exchanges and international transfers. Again, everything appeared sound. The third page dealt with projected returns over a 5-year period. Elena's eyes moved down the columns, her finger unconsciously tracing the flow of calculations, revenue projections, expense ratios, net profit margins. There. Her finger stopped on line 3, column 4. The number was 2.4 million, but based on the calculations above it, the initial investment, the projected growth rate, the compound interest, it should be 24 million. Someone had missed a digit, a single zero that transformed a reasonable return into a devastating loss. She read the line 3 more times, double-checking her mental math. No doubt remained. Elena looked up. Victor stood 5 feet away, arms crossed, watching her with an expression that revealed nothing. The other men had returned to their conversations, already bored with the game. "Well?" Victor asked. "Third line," Elena said clearly, her voice carrying across the sudden silence that fell over the room. "Column 4. You're missing a digit. Should be 24 million, not 2.4. Without that zero, your entire 5-year projection collapses. You'd be operating at a significant loss by year 3. The silence deepened. Someone's wine glass paused halfway to their lips. The heavy-set man who'd dismissed her earlier leaned forward, squinting at his own copy of the document. Victor's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his ice-blue eyes. Surprise? Respect? Elena couldn't tell. "She's right," the heavy-set man said slowly, his voice stripped of its earlier mockery. "Jesus, Victor. She's actually right. How did we miss that?" "You missed it," Victor replied, his gaze still locked on Elena. "Because you see what you expect to see. You assumed the projection was correct because it came from your own analysis department." She saw what was actually there. He took the document from Elena's hands, his fingers briefly brushing hers. Even that momentary contact felt charged, dangerous. "What's your name?" "Elena Martinez, sir." "How long did that take you, Elena? To find the error?" She glanced at the ornate clock on the wall. "Maybe 90 seconds, sir." Victor nodded slowly, as if confirming something he'd already suspected. He returned to his seat, pulled a leather checkbook from his jacket pocket, and began writing. The scratch of his pen was the only sound in the room. He tore out the check, folded it once, and stood again. A deal is a deal. Find the error, receive the reward. He crossed the room and placed the folded check in her hand. His voice dropped lower, meant only for her. "Though I suspect you would have answered even without the money. You couldn't help yourself. You saw the problem and you had to solve it." Elena looked down at the check, her hands beginning to tremble for the first time. $10 million. Written in Victor Constantine's precise, controlled handwriting, made out to her name. "Sir, I can't." "You can, and you will. You earned it fairly." He paused, studying her face again with that unnerving intensity. "Tell me, Elena Martinez, what does a woman who works 5 nights a week as a waitress need $10 million for?" She should have stayed silent, should have thanked him and left. But something in his eyes, Something that looked almost like genuine curiosity, rather than the cold calculation she'd expected, loosened her tongue. "My brother," she said quietly. "He has a heart condition. The treatments—" She stopped, unwilling to expose more of her life to these strangers. Victor's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "I see." He returned to his seat, dismissing her with a slight nod. "Thank you for your assistance, Miss Martinez. Enjoy your evening." Elena clutched the check and retreated from the room, her legs somehow carrying her despite feeling disconnected from her body. In the corridor outside, she leaned against the wall, the folded paper burning against her palm like a live coal. James appeared beside her, his eyes wide. "What happened in there? You were gone for 10 minutes. Nobody stays in the Constantine room that long." Elena unfolded the check, needing to see it again to confirm it was real. The numbers stared back at her, impossible and absolute. "I need to sit down. You need to get back to work," James hissed, though his voice held more concern than anger. "Whatever happened, whatever he said to you, forget it. Men like Victor Constantine don't do favors without expecting something in return. That's not how their world works." But Elena barely heard him. Her mind was already racing ahead. The payments she could make, the treatments Carlos could receive, the future that had seemed impossible just 15 minutes ago suddenly within reach. She didn't notice Victor standing at the frosted glass door, watching her through the distorted panes. Didn't see the contemplative expression on his face, or the way his hand rested against the glass as if he might push through and follow her. Inside the private room, the heavy-set man poured himself another glass of wine. "You planning to explain what that was about, Victor? $10 million for spotting a typo? Since when do you throw money at waitresses?" "Since one of them proved to be smarter than my entire accounting department," Victor replied, still watching Elena's retreating figure. "Do you know how rare it is to find someone who sees clearly? Who looks at a problem and finds the truth rather than the answer they want to see? She's a liability now," another man warned. "You gave her $10 million in front of witnesses. People will talk. Your competitors will wonder why. The authorities might ask questions. Let them." Victor finally turned away from the door, returning to his seat with a thoughtfulness that his associates rarely witnessed. "Have Marco run a background check. Full details. I want to know who Elena Martinez is, where she comes from, and what her life looks like." "Victor," the heavy-set man began, his tone cautionary. "She found an error that would have cost us $80 million over 5 years," Victor interrupted. "An error that your people, my people, 3 separate analysts missed. That's not luck. That's skill. That's the kind of mind I need on my side." He paused, swirling the wine in his glass. "Besides, there was something in her eyes. Something honest. You don't see that often in our world. Honesty can be dangerous," someone murmured. "Only if you're lying," Victor replied. "Which, gentlemen, we all are. Constantly. Maybe that's precisely why she interests me." Outside, Elena made her way to the staff locker room on shaking legs. The check remained clutched in her hand, already slightly crumpled from her grip. She pulled out her phone and photographed it, needing proof that this moment was real. Then she called the hospital. "Queens Medical Center. How may I direct your call?" "Carlos Martinez's room, please. Patient in the cardiology wing." The line clicked, rang twice. Her brother's voice, weak but alert. "Hello? Carlos, it's me." Elena's voice cracked despite her best efforts. "I need you to listen very carefully. Everything's going to be okay. All the treatments you need, the surgery they said we'd have to wait for. We can do it now. All of it." "Elena, what are you talking about? Did you win the lottery or something?" She laughed, a sound somewhere between joy and hysteria. "Something like that. I'll explain when I visit tomorrow. Just know that you're going to get better. I promise." After she ended the call, Elena sat alone in the locker room, the check laid flat on the bench beside her. The rain continued outside, but she barely heard it. Her life had just changed in the space of 10 minutes, in the time it took to scan a spreadsheet and speak 3 words. Third line, missing digit. She didn't know then what James had tried to warn her about, that Victor Constantine never did anything without purpose, that the check in her hand was only the beginning of something far more complicated than simple generosity. She didn't know that in accepting his challenge, she'd opened a door into a world from which there might be no return. All she knew was that her brother would live, and for that moment, in that rain-soaked November evening in Manhattan, nothing else mattered. But upstairs in the private dining room, Victor Constantine was already making plans, already seeing possibilities in Elena Martinez that she hadn't yet recognized in herself. already beginning to weave her into his world in ways that would change both their lives forever. The game had begun, though only one of them knew they were playing. The morning after receiving the check, Elena stood in the lobby of Capital Trust Bank on Fifth Avenue, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched her worn leather purse. The marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers, and every surface seemed designed to remind people like her that they didn't belong in spaces like this. "Miss Martinez?" A well-dressed bank manager approached, his smile professional but curious. "Please follow me to my office. A check of this magnitude requires special handling." Elena had barely slept. She'd spent the night researching Victor Constantine, her laptop glowing in the darkness of her small Brooklyn apartment. The results had been simultaneously impressive and terrifying. Businessman, philanthropist, investor. Those were the official titles. But beneath the polished surface lurked whispers and rumors, connections to powerful families, business rivals who mysteriously withdrew from competition, deals that seemed too perfectly orchestrated to be coincidence. Yet nothing concrete, nothing provable. Victor Constantine existed in the gray space between legitimate enterprise and something darker, and he navigated it with the skill of someone who'd spent a lifetime learning where the lines were drawn. "The check has cleared," the manager said, his tone respectful now as he reviewed his computer screen. "Mr. Constantine's accounts are well established with us. The funds will be available in your account within 24 hours. May I suggest speaking with one of our investment advisors? A sum this size requires careful management." Elena nodded absently, her mind already racing toward hospital bills, treatment schedules, the surgery Carlos needed. $10 million. It still felt like a dream, something that would dissolve if she examined it too closely. As she left the bank, her phone buzzed with a text from her manager at the Velvet Room. "Need to talk. Come in early today." The afternoon shift at the restaurant felt different. Elena noticed it immediately, the way conversation stopped when she entered rooms, how her coworkers' eyes followed her with a mixture of envy and concern. Even the kitchen staff, usually too busy to pay attention to front-of-house gossip, watched her with renewed interest. Marcus, the restaurant manager, waited for her in his office. He was a thin man in his 50s, with gray hair and kind eyes that had seen too much of the city's underbelly to be easily surprised. But today, those eyes held worry. "Close the door, Elena." She complied, her stomach tightening with anxiety. "You understand that what happened last night is unusual," Marcus began carefully. "Men like Victor Constantine don't hand out millions of dollars on a whim. They don't notice people like us. And when they do, there's always a reason. He gave me a challenge. I answered correctly. That's all it was." Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying her face. "Is it? Because this morning I received a phone call from his office. They're making a reservation for tonight. Victor Constantine specifically requested that you serve his table." Elena's heart skipped a beat. "He's coming back? For the third time this week. He usually comes once a month, Elena. Never more. And he's never requested a specific server." Marcus's voice softened. "I'm not telling you what to do. You're an adult, and after 2 years I trust your judgment. But be careful. Men in his position, they're used to getting what they want. And I'd hate to see you get hurt." "I can handle it," Elena said, with more confidence than she felt. "Can you? Because if he makes you uncomfortable, if he crosses any lines, you tell me immediately. I don't care how much money he has or how much influence. You're under my protection in this restaurant." The gesture touched her more than she'd expected. "Thank you, Marcus, really." Victor arrived at 8:30, as the dinner service reached its peak. He wasn't alone. 2 men accompanied him, both wearing suits that screamed expensive tailoring and discreet security training. They flanked him like shadows, their eyes constantly scanning the room with professional paranoia. But it was Victor who dominated the space. He moved through the restaurant like he owned it, which, Elena suddenly realized, he might actually do. She'd never thought to research who held the ownership stakes in the Velvet Room. "Miss Martinez." His voice was warmer than she remembered, though his eyes maintained their calculating sharpness. "I hope I'm not disrupting your evening." "Not at all, Mr. Constantine." "Your usual table?" "Actually, I was hoping for something more private. Perhaps the corner booth overlooking the street?" It was an unusual request. That booth was typically reserved for couples seeking intimacy, not businessmen with security details. But Elena simply nodded and led them across the dining room, acutely aware of the stares following their progress. Once they were seated, the 2 security men positioned themselves at a nearby table, close enough to intervene if needed, but far enough to provide the illusion of privacy. Wine? Elena asked, falling into the familiar rhythm of her work. Actually, I'd prefer to talk. Victor gestured to the empty seat across from him. Would you join me? Just for a moment. Every instinct told Elena this was a bad idea. She glanced toward Marcus, who watched from across the room with obvious concern. But curiosity, and something else, something she didn't want to examine too closely, made her slide into the booth. I'm working, Mr. Constantine. I've already spoken with Marcus. He's agreed to spare you for 15 minutes. Victor leaned forward slightly, his voice lowering. I want to apologize if my actions last night made you uncomfortable. That wasn't my intention. You gave me $10 million. I'm not uncomfortable. I'm confused. A genuine smile touched his lips, transforming his face from intimidating to almost handsome. Fair enough. Let me explain. I've built my business on finding talent where others don't think to look. Most people see a waitress. I saw someone who could solve in 90 seconds what 3 analysts missed in a week. That's valuable. So this was a job interview? In a manner of speaking. He paused as a waiter brought water glasses, waiting until they were alone again. I'm offering you a position at my company, Elena. Financial analyst. Starting salary of $300,000 per year, full benefits, and the opportunity to actually use that mind of yours for something more than memorizing dinner orders. Elena stared at him, certain she'd misheard. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you a career. Your background check. You ran a background check on me? Anger flared in her chest. Of course I did. Would you prefer I make business decisions based on feelings? His bluntness was almost refreshing. I know you attended NYU for 2 years studying business and accounting before your father died. I know you've been working 3 jobs to support your brother. I know you have student debt, medical bills, and about $47 in your checking account. Or you did until yesterday. The invasion of privacy should have outraged her. Instead, Elena found herself oddly calm. If you know all that, then you know I have no experience in corporate finance. I'd be useless to you. You'd be raw potential waiting to be developed. Everything else can be taught. Victor's expression became more intense. I didn't get where I am by following conventional wisdom, Elena. Everyone in my company went to the best schools, had the right connections, knew the right people, and they all missed that error. You didn't. That tells me you see the world differently, and that's exactly what I need. Why? The question emerged before Elena could stop it. Why do you really want me working for you? Victor was silent for a long moment, his ice blue eyes searching her face. Finally, he said, because you're honest. When you looked at that spreadsheet, you didn't see what I wanted you to see or what would benefit you to see. You saw the truth. In my world, that's rarer than you can imagine. Elena wanted to refuse. Every rational part of her brain screamed that getting involved with Victor Constantine was dangerous, that men like him didn't offer opportunities without expecting something in return. But another part, the part that remembered her abandoned dreams, her father's hopes for her future, the life she'd sacrificed to keep her family afloat, wanted desperately to say yes. I need to think about it, she said finally. Of course. Take your time. Victor reached into his jacket and produced a business card. Call me when you've decided, or if you need anything. Anything at all. The card was simple, elegant. Victor Constantine, CEO, Constantine Enterprises, followed by a phone number. I should get back to work, Elena said, sliding out of the booth. One more thing. Victor's voice stopped her. The money I gave you, it's yours regardless of your decision. No strings attached. I want you to understand that. Elena met his gaze, trying to decipher the truth behind his words. She saw intelligence there, calculation, but also something that might have been sincerity. Thank you, Mr. Constantine. Victor, if we're going to work together, you should call me Victor. I haven't said yes yet. No, he agreed, that slight smile returning. But you will. The next 3 days unfolded in a surreal blur. Elena visited Carlos in the hospital, met with his doctors, and scheduled the surgery that would finally repair his damaged heart. The relief on her brother's face, the hope in his eyes, it made everything else seem secondary. But Victor's offer haunted her thoughts. She researched Constantine Enterprises obsessively, discovering a vast network of investments spanning real estate, technology, international trade. The company was legitimate, profitable, respectable. Yet those persistent rumors followed Victor like shadows, whispers of a past that didn't quite align with his present, of power exercised through channels that didn't appear on any organizational chart. On the 4th day, As Elena finished her morning shift at the Brooklyn Cafe, she noticed a black Mercedes parked across the street. It had been there yesterday too, and the day before. Different car, same presence. She was being watched. The realization should have terrified her. Instead, it triggered a strange sense of inevitability. Victor had warned her in his way. In my world, he'd said. Not the business world or corporate America. My world. A place with different rules, different dangers. That evening, Elena pulled out Victor's business card and dialed the number. He answered on the second ring. Miss Martinez, I was beginning to think you'd decided against my offer. I have questions first. Ask them. Elena took a breath. Am I in danger? The cars following me, the men watching my apartment? Is that your protection or your surveillance? Silence stretched between them, and when Victor spoke again, his voice carried a weight it hadn't before. Both. My interest in you has drawn attention from people who might want to use that interest against me. The security is necessary. That's honest, at least. I told you. Honesty matters to me. A pause. Are you afraid? Yes, Elena admitted. But I'm also tired of being afraid of everything. Afraid of bills I can't pay. Of futures I can't plan. Of dreams I can't pursue. Your offer terrifies me, Victor. But so does spending the rest of my life wondering what if. Then work for me. Learn from me. I can't promise it will be easy, but I can promise you'll never be bored. And I can promise that as long as you're honest with me, I'll protect you. From what? From whatever comes. His voice softened. Elena, I know my reputation precedes me. I know what people say, what they suspect. Some of it is true. Some of it is exaggeration. But what I'm offering you is real. A chance to be more than circumstances have allowed you to be. The question is, are you brave enough to take it? Elena looked around her tiny apartment, at the second-hand furniture, the bills stacked on the kitchen counter, the photograph of her father that she kept by her bed. She thought of Carlos, finally getting the treatment he needed. She thought of the degree she'd abandoned, the career she'd sacrificed. When do I start? She could hear the smile in Victor's voice. Monday morning, 9 o'clock. I'll send a car for you. I can take the subway. Elena, you work for me now. You'll take the car. After ending the call, Elena sat in the gathering darkness of her apartment, wondering if she'd just made the best decision of her life or the worst. The Mercedes was still parked across the street, its presence both threatening and reassuring. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Welcome to Constantine Enterprises. Your employment contract and building access credentials will arrive tomorrow. Looking forward to working with you. Victor. A second text followed immediately. And Elena, thank you for trusting me. Monday morning arrived, wrapped in the sharp cold of December. Elena stood outside her apartment building at 8:30, dressed in her only professional suit, a simple navy ensemble she'd bought for college interviews 4 years ago. It still fit, though the cut was dated and the fabric showed its age. The black Mercedes pulled up precisely on time. The driver, a stern-faced man in his 60s, opened the rear door without a word. Elena slid inside, the leather seats cold against her legs. Manhattan rushed past the tinted windows, the city transforming from the familiar neighborhoods of Brooklyn into the gleaming corporate towers of Midtown. The car stopped in front of a building Elena had passed 1,000 times without truly seeing. 60 stories of glass and steel, the Constantine Enterprises logo etched discreetly above the entrance. Top floor, the driver said, speaking for the first time. Mr. Constantine is expecting you. The elevator ride felt endless. Helena watched the numbers climb, her reflection staring back from the polished doors. She looked young, nervous, completely out of her depth, which she supposed she was. The doors opened onto a reception area that belonged in an architecture magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of Manhattan, the morning sun painting the city in shades of gold. Expensive artwork adorned the walls. Everything spoke of power, money, and the kind of success Elena had only observed from a distance. Miss Martinez, a woman in her 40s, approached, her demeanor professional but not unkind. I'm Patricia, Mr. Constantine's executive assistant. Welcome to Constantine Enterprises. Victor is finishing a call, but he asked me to give you a brief orientation while you wait. Patricia led her through a maze of offices and conference rooms, explaining the company structure, the various departments, the expectations for employees. Elena tried to absorb it all, but her attention kept drifting to the views, to the obvious wealth surrounding her. to the reality that this was now her world. "And this," Patricia said, opening a door, "will be your office." Elena stepped inside and stopped breathing. It wasn't large, probably one of the smaller offices on the floor, but it had a window. A real window with a view of the city. A desk, a computer, bookshelves waiting to be filled. Her name was already printed on a placard by the door. Elena Martinez, financial analyst. "It's too much," Elena whispered. "It's what every analyst receives," Patricia assured her. "Though I'll admit, most of them have MBAs and years of experience. Victor must see something special in you. That's what worries me." Patricia's expression shifted, becoming almost maternal. "A word of advice? Victor Constantine is demanding, exacting, and he expects excellence. But he's also fair. If you work hard, if you're honest with him, he'll value you. Just be careful not to disappoint him. He doesn't forget, and he doesn't forgive easily." Before Elena could respond, Patricia's phone buzzed. "He's ready for you. His office is at the end of the hall. The door will be open." Victor's office occupied the entire northwest corner of the building. Elena entered to find him standing by the windows, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in rapid Russian. He turned as she entered, his eyes meeting hers, and she felt that same electric recognition she'd experienced in the restaurant. He was dressed more casually today, dark slacks, white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, no tie. It made him seem younger, more approachable, though the air of controlled power remained unchanged. Victor ended his call and pocketed his phone. "Elena, punctual. I appreciate that." He gestured to the seating area, a leather sofa and chairs arranged around a coffee table. "Please sit. We have a lot to discuss." Elena perched on the edge of the sofa, her posture rigid with nerves. Victor took the chair across from her, close enough that she could see the flecks of darker blue in his eyes. "First, I want to establish something important," he began. "Your success here depends on two things: your ability to learn and your willingness to be honest with me. I don't expect you to know everything. That's why I'm investing time in training you. But I do expect you to admit when you don't understand something and to speak up when you see problems. Can you do that?" "Yes." "Even if it means contradicting me? Even if it means pointing out my mistakes?" Elena thought of the spreadsheet, of how easily she might have stayed silent in that private dining room, especially then. Victor smiled, genuine pleasure lighting his features. "Good. That's exactly what I need to hear." He leaned back, his posture relaxing slightly. "You're going to work directly with me for the first 3 months. I want you to understand not just the technical aspects of financial analysis, but how I think, how I make decisions, what I look for in opportunities. You'll attend meetings, review contracts, analyze proposals. Consider yourself my apprentice." "That seems like an inefficient use of your time." "On the contrary, teaching you forces me to articulate processes I usually handle instinctively. You might be surprised how often that reveals flaws in my thinking." He paused. "Besides, I enjoy your perspective. You haven't been trained to see the world the way everyone else in this building does. That's valuable." Over the next hour, Victor outlined her responsibilities, the projects she'd be working on, the expectations for her performance. Elena's head spun with information, but beneath the professional discussion, she sensed something else, a current of interest that went beyond business, a attention that felt personal in ways that both excited and alarmed her. "Questions?" Victor asked finally. "Why me, really? Not the answer you gave me at the restaurant. The real reason." Victor was silent for a long moment, his gaze searching her face with an intensity that made her want to look away. When he spoke, his voice was quieter, more personal than before. "Because when you walked into that private dining room, you were afraid, but you didn't let fear control you. Because you saw a problem and solved it without worrying about what solving it might mean for you. Because in a room full of people who've spent their lives learning how to pretend, you were genuine." He leaned forward slightly. "And because I'm tired of being surrounded by people who tell me what I want to hear, instead of what I need to know. You're not like them, Elena, and I find that refreshing." The admission hung between them, weighted with implications Elena wasn't ready to examine. She stood abruptly, needing distance. "I should get to work." "Of course." Victor rose as well, that slight smile returning. "Patricia will show you how to access the systems you'll need. We'll meet again tomorrow morning to discuss your first project. And Elena?" She turned at the door. "Welcome to my world. I think you'll find it interesting." As Elena made her way back to her office, her hands trembling slightly with adrenaline, and something that might have been anticipation, she didn't notice Victor standing at his window, watching her reflection in the glass, didn't see the contemplative expression on his face, or the way his hand curled into a fist at his side, as if restraining himself from following her. In accepting his offer, Elena had stepped through a door that would prove far more difficult to exit than enter. Victor Constantine had chosen her for reasons that went beyond her skill with numbers, and the game they'd begun in that rain-soaked restaurant was only just beginning. The pieces were in motion, the stakes were rising, and neither of them fully understood yet just how much they stood to lose. 3 weeks into her new position, Elena stood in Victor's office at 11 o'clock at night, surrounded by spreadsheets that covered every available surface. The Manhattan skyline glittered beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, a constellation of light against the winter darkness. Most of the building had emptied hours ago, leaving only the distant hum of cleaning crews and the occasional ping of elevator arrivals. "There," Elena said, pointing to a series of transactions highlighted in yellow on her laptop screen. "These transfers to the Singapore account, they're structured to look like routine operational expenses, but the timing is wrong. They're occurring every 17 days, not monthly like the others, and the amounts are just below the threshold that would trigger automatic compliance reviews." Victor moved closer, studying the screen over her shoulder. She'd grown accustomed to his proximity over the past weeks, though her awareness of him never quite faded. He smelled of expensive cologne and coffee, a combination that had become familiar during their long working sessions. "How much total?" he asked. "Over the past 6 months, nearly $8 million. Someone's been very careful, very patient." Elena pulled up another document, but they made a mistake in the routing codes. "See? These 3 transactions went through different intermediary banks than the others. It breaks the pattern." Victor straightened, his expression darkening. "Marcus Chen. It has to be. He's the only one with access to these accounts who would know how to structure transfers this way." His jaw tightened with barely controlled anger. 20 years, I've known him for 20 years. Elena watched emotions flicker across Victor's face. Betrayal, fury, something that might have been hurt. It was the first time she'd seen his composure crack, revealing the human beneath the calculated exterior. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I know he's your friend. He was my friend. Now he's a liability." Victor walked to the windows, his reflection ghostly against the city lights. "This is excellent work, Elena. You found in 3 weeks what our internal auditors missed for 6 months. I wasn't looking for anything specific. That's probably why I saw it. Sometimes fresh eyes. It's more than that." Victor turned to face her, the city framing him like a portrait of power. "You have an instinct for patterns, for things that don't fit. That's not something that can be taught." He paused, studying her with that intense focus she'd come to recognize. "You're wasted on spreadsheets. I want you in the strategy meetings. I want your eyes on every major decision we make." "Victor, I've been here 3 weeks. Your senior staff my senior staff missed $8 million in theft. You didn't. That's all the qualification you need." He moved back to his desk, already reaching for his phone. "Go home. Get some rest. Tomorrow is going to be difficult." Elena began gathering her things, exhaustion settling into her bones. The past weeks had been a blur of learning, not just the technical aspects of her job, but the unwritten rules of Victor's world. How to read the silences in meetings, how to distinguish between the legitimate business operations and the carefully orchestrated arrangements that existed in legal gray areas, how to navigate the complex web of loyalties and rivalries that defined Constantine Enterprises. "Elena," Victor's voice stopped her at the door. "Thank you for your honesty, for not being afraid to show me what you found, even knowing it would cause problems. That's what you hired me for." "Yes, but not everyone would have done it." His expression softened almost imperceptibly. "You continue to surprise me." The car Victor had assigned her, along with a driver named Thomas who possessed the discretion of a priest and the awareness of a bodyguard, waited at the building's entrance. Elena had stopped protesting the security measures after the first week, recognizing them as non-negotiable. "Home, Miss Martinez?" Thomas asked as she slid into the back seat. "Actually, the hospital first. I know it's late, but, of course, your brother's still in recovery from his surgery?" Elena smiled, grateful for Thomas's quiet kindness. "Yes. The doctors say he's healing perfectly. I just want to check on him." The drive to Queens Medical Center took 40 minutes through light late-night traffic. Elena used the time to respond to emails, her phone glowing in the darkness. Her mother had sent another worried text, asking when Elena would visit for dinner, unable to understand why her daughter's new job consumed so much time. How could Elena explain that she wasn't just learning a career, she was being initiated into a world her family couldn't comprehend? Carlos was awake when she arrived, reading a graphic novel in the soft light of his hospital room. At 19, he still looked like the kid brother Elena had protected throughout their childhood, though the surgery had brought color back to his face and strength to his voice. "You look exhausted," he said as she kissed his forehead. "Long day, but good. I found something important." "Another error?" Carlos grinned. "You're making a habit of that." Elena settled into the chair beside his bed, slipping off her heels with relief. "This job it's more than I expected. More complicated." Complicated how? She considered how much to share. Carlos knew she worked for Victor Constantine, knew the man had given her the money for his surgery, but Elena had been careful to shield him from the darker implications of her new position. "The business world is different from what I imagined. There are rules, but also exceptions to rules. Things that are technically legal, but morally ambiguous. Victor operates in those spaces with incredible skill." "Are you safe?" Carlos asked, his expression serious. "Yes. Victor is protective, sometimes overly so, but I'm learning to navigate it." Elena took her brother's hand. "How are you feeling? Really?" "Strong. The doctors say I might be discharged next week. Full recovery in about 2 months." His eyes shone with gratitude. "Because of you. Because you met the right person at the right time. Because I looked at a spreadsheet and saw a missing zero. No, because you were brave enough to speak up when everyone else stayed silent. That's who you are, Elena. Don't lose that, no matter how complicated this job gets." His words stayed with her during the drive back to her apartment in Brooklyn, the small one-bedroom she'd lived in for 3 years, which now felt impossibly distant from the gleaming offices of Midtown Manhattan. Elena had received her first paycheck the week before, an amount that still seemed surreal. She could afford to move, to find something larger, closer to work. But she wasn't ready to leave this space yet. These walls that remembered who she'd been before Victor Constantine entered her life. The next morning arrived too quickly. Elena dressed carefully in one of the 3 new suits she'd purchased. Charcoal gray with a silk blouse. Professional but not trying too hard. Patricia had taken her shopping the previous week, gently suggesting that Elena's wardrobe needed to reflect her position in the company. The experience had been both humiliating and oddly touching, Patricia's matter-of-fact kindness making the charity easier to accept. The strategy meeting was scheduled for 9:30 in the main conference room. Elena arrived 15 minutes early to find Victor already there, reviewing documents with an intensity that created an almost visible force field around him. "Coffee?" he asked without looking up. "Already had 2 cups. Any more and I'll vibrate through the floor." The ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Nervous?" "Terrified. Your senior staff is going to wonder why someone with 3 weeks' experience is sitting in on strategic planning. Let them wonder. I don't explain my decisions." Victor finally looked up, his gaze assessing. "You found major theft that no one else detected. That earns you a seat at this table, trust me." The other executives began arriving. 7 men and 2 women, all impeccably dressed, all carrying themselves with the confidence of people accustomed to power. Elena recognized them from her orientation. Richard Torres, CFO, Sandra Huang, Head of International Operations, James Morrison, Chief Legal Counsel, and 4 others whose names she'd memorized but whose functions still confused her. They took their seats around the massive table, some nodding politely to Elena, others ignoring her entirely. The atmosphere was professional but tense, everyone aware that Victor had called an unusual meeting. Victor waited until everyone was settled, then began without preamble. "Marcus Chen has been stealing from the company. $8 million over 6 months. Routed through Singapore and the Cayman Islands. Elena discovered it 3 weeks into her employment. Would anyone like to explain how our internal controls missed this for half a year?" The silence was absolute. Elena watched faces carefully, shock on most, but also calculation. Sandra Huang's expression remained completely neutral, which was itself revealing. "How do we know it was Marcus?" James Morrison asked carefully. "Because he's the only person with the necessary access and knowledge to structure the theft this way." Victor's voice was cold, controlled. "Elena will walk you through the evidence. Please pay attention. I want everyone to understand how we failed so we can ensure it doesn't happen again." For the next 20 minutes, Elena presented her findings, her voice steady despite her racing heart. She'd learned from watching Victor that confidence was half perception, and she forced herself to speak with authority. The executives listened intently, several taking notes, their initial skepticism gradually shifting to grudging respect. "The question," Richard Torres said when she finished, "is what we do about it. Marcus has been with us since the beginning. He knows where all the bodies are buried." The phrase made Elena's skin prickle. It was probably metaphorical, but with Victor's reputation, she couldn't be entirely certain. "We handle it quietly," Victor said. "Marcus will resign for personal reasons. The money will be repaid in full, plus compensation for our investigation costs. In exchange, we don't pursue charges. He disappears from New York and never works in finance again. That's generous," Sandra observed. "Some might say too generous. Some might say I value loyalty enough to give even traitors one chance to walk away." Victor's tone made clear the conversation was over. "James, draw up the agreement. Sandra, I want you to personally oversee the transition of Marcus's responsibilities. As of this morning, Elena is promoted to senior analyst and will be taking on some of his portfolio." The announcement sent shockwaves through the room. Elena's stomach dropped. She'd expected praise for finding the theft, not a massive promotion. "Victor," Richard began carefully, "Elena is obviously talented, but 3 weeks. 3 weeks in which she accomplished what your entire department failed to do in 6 months." Victor interrupted. "I'm not interested in seniority or credentials. I'm interested in results. Elena gets results." His gaze swept the table. "Does anyone else have concerns they'd like to voice?" No one spoke. The message was clear. Victor had made his decision, and arguing was pointless. After the meeting, as the executives filed out, Sandra Huang lingered. She approached Elena with a slight smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Congratulations on your promotion. Quite impressive for someone so new." "Thank you," Elena said carefully, sensing the danger beneath Sandra's polished exterior. "A word of advice? In this company, loyalty to Victor is everything. He rewards it generously and punishes betrayal without mercy. You've seen him at his best. Brilliant, protective, generous. Pray you never see him at his worst." Before Elena could respond, Sandra left, her heels clicking against the marble floor with military precision. "Don't let Sandra intimidate you," Victor said from behind Elena. She turned to find him watching the doorway where Sandra had disappeared. "She's testing you, seeing if you'll crack under pressure. Will there be more tests?" "Constantly. You've risen too far too fast. People will want to see if you deserve it or if you're just—" He trailed off. "Just what? Your charity case? Your favorite?" Victor's expression shifted, something flickering in his eyes that Elena couldn't quite read. "You're neither. You're talented, and I recognize talent when I see it. But yes, people will speculate about our relationship. They'll wonder if there's more to it than professional respect." "Is there?" The question escaped before Elena could stop it. The silence stretched between them, heavy with implications. Victor took a step closer, close enough that Elena could see the fine lines around his eyes, the silver threading through his dark hair at the temples. "What do you think?" he asked quietly. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. Over the past 3 weeks, she'd felt it growing. The awareness between them, the way conversations lingered too long, the way his hand would brush hers when passing documents, the way he watched her when he thought she wasn't looking. She told herself it was projection, imagination, the natural result of spending so much time together. But standing here now, with Victor's ice-blue eyes searching her face with that characteristic intensity, Elena couldn't deny it any longer. Whatever was building between them was real, dangerous, and entirely inappropriate. "I think," she said carefully, "that this is complicated enough without adding personal feelings to the mix." Agreed. But Victor didn't step back. "And yet they're there anyway, aren't they? These inconvenient feelings we're both trying to ignore. Victor, it's all right. I'm not asking you for anything. I'm simply acknowledging what we both know is true." Finally, he moved away, returning to his professional distance. "Your new office is on the 48th floor corner suite. Patricia will help you move your things this afternoon. We have a meeting with potential investors at 2 o'clock. I want you there." "To do what?" "To watch, to learn, and to tell me afterward what everyone was really saying beneath their polite corporate language. You're good at that, seeing what people try to hide." The afternoon meeting took place in a private dining room at an exclusive restaurant Elena had only read about in magazines. 3 investors from a London-based firm were considering a partnership that would expand Constantine Enterprises into European markets. The deal was worth hundreds of millions. Elena sat beside Victor, taking notes and observing. The conversation flowed in the careful language of high-stakes business. Veiled threats disguised as concerns, demands wrapped in suggestions, power plays masked as collaboration. She watched body language, noticed who deferred to whom, cataloged the moments when smiles didn't match words. Victor was masterful. He gave ground on minor points, making the investors feel powerful, while never budging on anything that truly mattered. He was charming when needed, intimidating when necessary, and always in control. "What did you think?" he asked later, as their car navigated through midtown traffic back to the office. "They're going to agree to your terms. Williams, the senior partner, is already convinced. He's just performing due diligence for his board. But Chen, the younger one, he's nervous about something." He kept glancing at his phone under the table. "I noticed that too. What do you think it means?" "Either he's got concerns he hasn't voiced or someone's pressuring him to derail the deal." Elena flipped through her notes. "He also reacted when you mentioned the Singapore expansion. Just a slight tension around his eyes, but it was there." Victor pulled out his own phone, typing rapidly. "I'll have someone look into his connections in Singapore." "Good catch." They worked in comfortable silence for the rest of the drive. Elena's laptop balanced on her knees as she compiled her observations into a formal report. This had become their rhythm. Victor testing her, challenging her, pushing her to see deeper, think more critically. She was learning at an exponential rate, absorbing not just business strategy but the subtle art of reading people, understanding motivations, anticipating moves before they were made. "Elena," Victor said as the car pulled up to their building, "I need you to understand something. The promotion I gave you today will create enemies, people who've been with the company for years, who expected those positions, who resent your rapid advancement. Some of that resentment will be professional. Some of it will be personal, directed at you because of your relationship with me. Our professional relationship, yes. But others won't see it that way. They'll assume," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "they'll assume you've earned your position through means other than merit." Heat flooded Elena's cheeks. "Let them assume. I know the truth. You know the truth. That's what matters." "Is it?" Victor's gaze held hers. "Because I need to know you can handle it. The whispers, the speculation, the judgment. I need to know you won't let it affect your work or your confidence. I've spent my whole life being underestimated, Victor. Being a waitress, people treated me like I was invisible. At least now they're noticing me, even if they're judging. I'll take that over invisibility." Something shifted in Victor's expression. Approval mixed with something warmer, more personal. "You're stronger than you know. That's one of the things He stopped himself. "One of the things I respect about you." They held each other's gaze for a moment too long, the air in the car suddenly charged with unspoken tension. Then Victor's phone rang, shattering the moment. "I have to take this," he said, his tone returning to business. "Go home. Rest. Tomorrow we're flying to Boston to meet with the Caldwell Group. Early flight, 6 a.m. Thomas will pick you up at 4:30. "Boston? Victor, I don't have—" "Patricia has already arranged everything, clothes, travel documents, hotel reservation. All you need to do is show up." As Elena rode the elevator down to the lobby, her head spinning with the day's events, she tried to process everything that had happened. A promotion, a near confession from Victor, a business trip to Boston. 3 weeks ago, she'd been serving dinner to wealthy strangers. Now she was one of them, or at least she was supposed to be. But Carlos's words echoed in her mind. "Don't lose who you are." Looking at her reflection in the elevator's polished doors, Elena wondered if it was already too late. The woman staring back wore designer clothes and carried a leather briefcase. She spoke confidently in board meetings and analyzed million-dollar deals. She was becoming someone her family wouldn't quite recognize. And the most terrifying part? She liked it. Liked the challenge, the respect, the feeling of using her mind for something that mattered. Liked working beside Victor, matching his intensity, earning his approval. Liked him. That was the truth she'd been avoiding, the feeling she'd tried to dismiss as gratitude or admiration or professional respect. But tonight, in the car, when he'd almost said something before stopping himself, Elena had felt it clearly, this pull between them that went far beyond business, far beyond appropriate. Victor Constantine was 40 years old, powerful, dangerous, and wrapped in more secrets than she could probably ever uncover. Getting involved with him romantically would be the worst decision she could make. And yet, as Elena settled into the back of her car for the drive home, She couldn't stop replaying the moment when their eyes had met, the electricity that had sparked between them, the way her name sounded when he said it with that particular intensity. She was in dangerous territory, walking a line between professional and personal that grew thinner every day. And the worst part was that she wasn't sure she wanted to step back to safety. The game was changing. The stakes were rising. And Elena was no longer certain who was playing whom. The private jet cut through the pre-dawn darkness, its cabin lights dimmed to allow passengers to rest during the 90-minute flight to Boston. Elena sat across from Victor at a polished wood table, both of them surrounded by documents for the upcoming meeting with the Caldwell Group. She'd never been on a private plane before, had never imagined she would be, and the casual luxury of it still felt surreal. "You're not looking at the brief," Victor observed without glancing up from his own papers. "I memorized it last night. The Caldwell Group owns 17 properties across New England, primarily commercial real estate. They're cash-heavy but growth-stagnant. They need our international connections and market expertise. We need their established regional presence. And what they're not saying?" Elena had learned this was Victor's favorite question, the game of finding what lived beneath the surface of every deal. They're desperate. 2 of their major tenants are leaving, and they can't attract replacements with their current management structure. They need this partnership more than we do, which means we negotiate from strength. Victor finally looked up, a slight smile playing at his lips. "You learn fast." "I have a good teacher." The words hung between them, weighted with the tension that had been building since yesterday's almost confession. Victor's eyes held hers for a moment that stretched too long, and Elena felt her pulse quicken despite her best efforts to remain professional. "Coffee?" Victor asked, breaking the moment as he stood to pour from the plane's elaborate service station. "Please. Black? No sugar. I know how you take your coffee, Elena. I pay attention." The statement was simple, but it carried implications that made Elena's stomach flutter. Of course he knew how she took her coffee. They'd spent countless late nights working together. But the way he said it, the quiet intimacy in his tone, suggested he paid attention to more than just her beverage preferences. Victor returned with 2 cups, settling back into his seat. Outside the windows, the sky was beginning to lighten, painting the clouds in shades of pink and gold. "Tell me something," Victor said, his tone shifting to something more personal. "Do you regret it? Accepting my offer, entering this world?" "Why would you ask that?" "Because I've watched you change over the past month. You're more confident, more assertive. But sometimes when you think no one's looking, I see doubt in your eyes, like you're not sure if you made the right choice." Elena considered lying, maintaining the professional facade they'd both been hiding behind. But Victor had been honest with her from the beginning, and she owed him the same courtesy. "I don't regret it, but sometimes I feel like I'm becoming someone my family doesn't recognize. My mother asks when I'm coming home for dinner, and I tell her I'm working. My friends from before, they don't understand this life. The hours, the pressure, the constant calculation." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "And then there's you. What about me? You're the most complicated part of all this. You gave me an opportunity that changed my life. You've been patient, supportive, protective, but I don't fully understand why, and the not knowing keeps me up at night." Victor was silent for a long moment, his fingers tracing the rim of his coffee cup. When he spoke, his voice was lower, more vulnerable than she'd ever heard it. "My wife died 5 years ago. Catherine. Cancer. She was 33. He stared out the window, his reflection ghostly against the brightening sky. "After she died, I buried myself in work, built the company into something 3 times its previous size, made more money than I could spend in 5 lifetimes, and I was completely, utterly alone." Elena's heart constricted. She'd known about his wife from her research, but hearing him speak about her made it real, made the loss tangible. "I surrounded myself with people," Victor continued, "but they were all employees, associates, business partners, people who wanted something from me or feared me or both. No one who saw me as just a person." He turned back to face her. "Then you walked into that private dining room and you weren't impressed by my money or intimidated by my reputation. You just solved a problem because it needed solving. And I thought, here's someone real. Victor, I'm not telling you this to make you uncomfortable. I'm telling you because you asked why I chose you, and you deserve an honest answer." His ice blue eyes held hers with characteristic intensity. "Yes, you're talented. Yes, you're intelligent, but mostly you're genuine. And I've found that quality increasingly rare in my world." The plane's intercom crackled to life. "Mr. Constantine will be landing in 15 minutes. Victor stood, the moment breaking as he shifted back into business mode. We should prepare. The Caldwell team will meet us at their offices at 8:30. The Caldwell Group headquarters occupied a historic building in Boston's financial district, all brick facade and restored interior attempting to project old money stability. Elena walked beside Victor through the lobby, acutely aware of the stares they attracted, not just because of Victor's obvious wealth and power, but because of how they looked together. She could almost hear the speculation. Who is she? His assistant? His associate? Something more? The meeting took place in a conference room that tried too hard to impress, with its mahogany paneling and antique furniture. 3 men waited. Robert Caldwell, the 70-year-old patriarch, his son James, who looked to be in his 40s, and their attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Chen. Mr. Constantine, thank you for meeting with us, Robert began, his handshake firm despite his age. And this is? Elena Martinez, my senior analyst. She'll be reviewing all aspects of any potential partnership. Elena caught the slight emphasis Victor placed on senior analyst, establishing her authority in the room. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. The negotiations lasted 3 hours. Elena took notes and observed, watching the dynamic between father and son. Robert clearly wanting the deal, James resistant and defensive. The attorney, Patricia, remained neutral, but Elena noticed how her questions focused on exit clauses and termination provisions. Someone was planning for failure. During a break, while the Caldwell team caucused in another room, Victor turned to Elena. Impressions? James doesn't want to sell. Or rather, he doesn't want to admit his father was right about needing outside help. Pride will make him difficult. Elena flipped through her notes. But the attorney is the real concern. She's protecting them from something specific. Notice how she kept asking about liability for prior management decisions. You think there's something they're not disclosing. I think we should require a full audit before finalizing anything. Whatever they're hiding, it's significant enough that their attorney is worried about exposure. Victor's expression showed approval. Make a note. We'll add it to our terms. When negotiations resumed, Victor presented their revised conditions, including the comprehensive audit. James Caldwell's face darkened immediately. That wasn't part of our initial discussions, he said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. Initial discussions often evolve as we learn more about potential partnerships, Victor replied smoothly. Surely you understand the need for due diligence in a deal of this magnitude. What my colleague means, Patricia the attorney interjected carefully, is that some aspects of the Caldwell Group's operations involve sensitive client information. A full audit might compromise confidentiality agreements. Elena caught Victor's eye, a silent communication passing between them. That was it. Whatever they were hiding involved their clients. Then we'll sign appropriate NDAs, Victor said. But I don't enter partnerships blindly, regardless of how promising they appear on the surface. The room fell silent. Robert Caldwell looked at his son, some wordless conversation happening between them. Finally, the older man nodded. We'll agree to the audit, but it needs to be conducted discreetly, and we'll need to notify certain clients before you access their files. Acceptable, Victor said. Our team will coordinate with yours on the timeline. After the meeting concluded and they were back in the car heading to the airport, Elena turned to Victor. They're laundering money. That's what the audit will find. Victor's expression remained neutral. Possibly. Or they've simply been creative with their accounting to minimize tax exposure. Either way, it's information we need before committing resources. And if it is money laundering? If their clients are... Elena stopped, suddenly aware of the implications. We'd be partnering with people involved in illegal activities. We'd be partnering with people who have business challenges that require careful navigation, Victor corrected. Whether we proceed depends on the nature and scope of those challenges. Elena stared at him, trying to reconcile this response with the man who'd spoken so vulnerably on the flight up. You'd actually consider moving forward even if they're breaking the law? Elena, you've been in this world for 5 weeks. You're smart enough to understand that legal and right aren't always the same thing, and sometimes the path between them is complicated. That's not an answer. Victor sighed, rubbing his temples. You want me to be absolute, to say I'd never do business with anyone who's ever broken a regulation or found creative interpretations of tax law. But that would eliminate 90% of potential partners. The world you came from, it has clear lines, clear rules. The world I operate in lives in the gray spaces. You asked me to be honest with you. This is honesty. Elena turned away, looking out the window at Boston passing by. Part of her had known this moment would come, when she'd have to confront exactly what working for Victor Constantine meant. She'd seen the warning signs, heard the rumors, felt the weight of the secrets that surrounded him. But she'd been able to ignore them when the work was exciting, and Victor was charming and everything felt like an adventure. Now, faced with the reality of what this partnership might involve, Elena couldn't ignore it anymore. I need you to promise me something, she said finally, still looking out the window. What? That you won't ask me to compromise my integrity, that if something crosses a line I can't cross, you'll respect that. Victor was quiet for a long moment. When Elena turned back to face him, his expression was serious, almost sad. I promise. If something makes you uncomfortable, we'll discuss it. And if you can't be part of it, I'll find another way. He reached across the seat, his hand stopping just short of touching hers. I don't want to corrupt you, Elena. I want to teach you how to navigate a complicated world while staying true to yourself. But I understand if that's not possible. If this is too much, if I'm too much, you can walk away. No judgment, no consequences. Except I'd lose my job, my salary, my ability to pay for Carlos's treatment. No. The money I gave you initially, plus 6 months' salary as severance. You'd be fine financially. The only thing you'd lose is this. He gestured between them. Whatever this is that we're both pretending isn't happening. There it was. The admission they'd been dancing around for weeks. The acknowledgement that something existed between them beyond professional respect, beyond mentorship, beyond any appropriate workplace relationship. We can't, Elena whispered. You're my boss. The power dynamic alone makes it impossible. I know. Victor's hand finally closed the distance, his fingers brushing hers in the lightest of touches. But knowing something's impossible doesn't make it less real. They didn't speak for the rest of the drive or during the flight back to New York. But the silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was charged with all the things they weren't saying, all the feelings they were both trying to control. Elena used the time to think, to really examine what she wanted. She could walk away, take Victor's generous severance, find another job with her newfound experience and connections. It would be the safe choice, the smart choice, the choice that didn't involve falling for a man whose world was built on moral ambiguity and carefully maintained secrets. But when she looked at Victor, reading documents with that intense focus, his profile sharp against the window, his presence filling the small space with barely contained energy, Elena knew she wasn't going to walk away. Not yet, maybe not ever. She was in too deep, had come too far, wanted too much of what this new life offered. The challenge, the respect, the feeling of being valued for her mind rather than just her service. And yes, she wanted him, wanted to understand him, to see behind the walls he'd built, to touch the vulnerability he'd shown her so briefly. It was dangerous. It was probably foolish, but it was real. When they landed at Teterboro Airport, evening had fallen over New York. Victor's driver waited on the tarmac, but Victor paused before heading to the car. I have a place in the city, he said. A penthouse. Very private, very secure. I'd like to show it to you. Elena's heart hammered. This was the moment. The crossing of a line from which there might be no return. She should say no, should maintain the professional boundary, should protect herself from the inevitable complications. Okay, she heard herself say. The penthouse occupied the entire top floor of a building in Tribeca, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering 360-degree views of Manhattan. The interior was minimalist but warm, all clean lines and expensive materials with artwork that even Elena recognized as significant. This is where you live? She asked, walking to the windows. Sometimes. I have a house in Connecticut where I stay on weekends, but when I'm working late, I stay here. Victor moved to the kitchen, pulling out a bottle of wine. Drink? I probably shouldn't. Probably not. But he poured 2 glasses anyway. They stood by the windows, the city spread below them like a sea of light. Elena could feel the tension building, the awareness of being alone together in this intimate space, all the professional barriers stripped away. Tell me to leave, Elena said quietly. Tell me this is a bad idea and I'll go. Victor set down his wine glass and turned to face her fully. I can't tell you that. Because the truth is, you're the first person in 5 years who's made me feel something other than empty. And I'm selfish enough to want more of that feeling, even knowing it's complicated and potentially destructive. I don't know how to do this, how to separate work from whatever this is, how to be your employee, and also, Elena stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Also mine. Victor moved closer, close enough that she could feel the heat of his body. We don't have to figure it all out tonight. We don't have to make decisions or commitments or promises. But I need you to understand something, Elena. When I look at you, I don't see an employee. I see someone who challenges me, who isn't afraid of me, who makes me want to be honest even when honesty is dangerous. Victor. He reached up, his fingers barely touching her face, giving her every opportunity to pull away. When she didn't, when she instead leaned almost imperceptibly into his touch, something shifted in his expression, desire mixing with something deeper, more vulnerable. Tell me you feel it too, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Tell me I'm not imagining this. Elena's rational mind screamed warnings, listed all the reasons this was a terrible idea. But her heart had been his since that first night in the restaurant when he'd seen her as more than invisible, when he'd given her a chance to prove herself. I feel it, she admitted, and it terrifies me. Me too. Then Victor kissed her, and Elena's world tilted on its axis. His lips were soft but insistent, one hand cupping her face while the other slid to her waist, pulling her closer. Elena's hands found his shoulders, then his hair, and she kissed him back with all the want she'd been suppressing for weeks. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Victor rested his forehead against hers. I should apologize, he said, but I'm not going to. Good, because I'd have to call you a liar. He laughed, the sound surprising and genuine. What are we doing, Elena? Something complicated, something that probably won't end well, but something real. Victor pulled back enough to look at her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. I can't offer you uncomplicated. My life, my past, the things I've done, it's all messy and morally ambiguous and sometimes dangerous. But I can offer you honesty and protection, and whatever version of myself isn't consumed by business and obligation. That's enough, Elena said, and she meant it. They stood together by the windows, New York glittering below them, two people who'd found each other across impossible distances, social, economic, experiential, and decided the risk was worth taking. Neither of them spoke about tomorrow, about what this meant for their working relationship, about the complications that would inevitably arise. For this moment they simply existed together, two people allowing themselves to feel something real in a world built on careful calculations and strategic moves. But outside the warmth of the penthouse, forces were already moving. Elena's rapid rise had created enemies within the company. Victor's interest in her had drawn attention from rivals who would gladly use that vulnerability against him. And the Caldwell deal, with its buried secrets and complicated implications, would soon force both of them to confront exactly what lines they were willing to cross. The game was accelerating. The stakes were rising. And Elena and Victor had just made themselves each other's greatest weakness. 3 weeks after that night in the penthouse, Elena sat in a sterile conference room at the FBI's New York field office, her hands folded on the table to hide their trembling. Across from her sat two agents, Special Agent Jennifer Walsh, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and sharper questions, and her partner, Agent David Park, younger but equally intense. Miss Martinez, do you understand why you're here? Agent Walsh asked, her tone professionally neutral. You said you wanted to discuss my employment at Constantine Enterprises. Elena's voice was steadier than she felt. She'd been leaving work when two agents approached her on the street, flashing badges and requesting she accompany them. Not arrested. They'd been very clear about that. Just questions. Specifically, we want to discuss Victor Constantine. Agent Park opened a folder, spreading photographs across the table. Elena recognized them immediately. Victor at various business meetings, entering restaurants, standing outside his Connecticut house. And there, in several photos, was Elena herself beside him. Her stomach dropped. We've been investigating Constantine Enterprises for 18 months. Agent Walsh continued. Financial irregularities, potential money laundering, connections to organized crime families. Nothing concrete yet, but enough smoke to suggest fire. And then you appeared, a waitress who suddenly became his senior analyst, his constant companion, his... She paused meaningfully. What would you call your relationship with Mr. Constantine? Professional, Elena said automatically, though the photos suggested otherwise. There was one of them leaving his penthouse building together at midnight, another of Victor's hand on her lower back as they entered a restaurant, his body language protective and possessive. Professional, Agent Walsh repeated skeptically. Miss Martinez, we're not interested in your personal life. We're interested in Victor Constantine's business practices, and we believe you're in a unique position to help us. I don't understand what you think I can tell you. Agent Park leaned forward. You have access to files, meetings, conversations that we can't reach. You've been inside his operation for 2 months, gained his trust. You could provide evidence of financial crimes that would... You want me to spy on him? Elena's voice came out flat, emotionless, even as panic clawed at her chest. We want you to cooperate with an ongoing federal investigation, Agent Walsh corrected. In exchange, we'd offer you full immunity from any charges that might arise from your association with Constantine's activities. We'd also provide protection for you and your family. Protection from what? The agents exchanged glances. Miss Martinez, do you know what happened to the last person who betrayed Victor Constantine's trust? Marcus Chen, his former CFO? Elena's blood ran cold. She knew Marcus had resigned, had left New York quietly after repaying the stolen money. Victor had told her it was handled, resolved peacefully. Marcus Chen is alive and well in Seattle, Agent Park said, but only because he had enough evidence of Constantine's activities to ensure his safety. He made it clear that if anything happened to him, that information would be released. Not everyone has been so fortunate. Are you saying Victor has hurt people? Elena's voice cracked on the question. We're saying that Victor Constantine operates in a world where problems are solved through intimidation, financial pressure, and occasionally, violence. He's careful, insulated, but people around him have accidents. Business rivals withdraw suddenly. Whistleblowers recant their statements. Agent Walsh's expression softened slightly. You seem like a smart woman, Miss Martinez. Surely you've noticed that something about Constantine Enterprises doesn't add up. Elena had noticed. The meetings that ended when she entered rooms. The phone calls Victor took in Russian or Italian, his voice dropping to a murmur. The way certain associates watched her with expressions that mixed pity and warning. She'd told herself it was just aggressive business practices, the normal machinations of corporate power. But deep down, she'd known there was more. What exactly are you accusing him of? Elena asked. Money laundering for several international organizations, tax evasion through complex offshore structures, potentially providing financial services to entities engaged in illegal activities. Agent Walsh paused. And we believe the Caldwell Group deal you're currently working on is specifically designed to expand those capabilities into New England. The audit. Elena had completed it 2 weeks ago, and her findings had been troubling. Patterns of cash transactions that didn't match legitimate business activity, clients whose backgrounds didn't hold up under scrutiny, accounts structured to obscure the origin of funds. She'd presented her concerns to Victor, expecting him to walk away from the deal. Instead, he'd asked her to find ways to structure the partnership to minimize their liability while still proceeding. I need to think about this, Elena said, her mind racing. I need time. You have 48 hours, Agent Walsh said, sliding a business card across the table. After that, we move forward with or without your cooperation. And, Miss Martinez, if you warn Constantine about this conversation, you'll be charged with obstruction of justice. Is that clear? Elena took the card with numb fingers. Crystal clear. The car ride back to her apartment felt surreal, the city lights blurring past the windows as Elena tried to process what had just happened. The FBI was investigating Victor. They wanted her to betray him, to gather evidence, to help build a case that would likely destroy everything he'd built. And the worst part, the part that made her stomach twist with nausea, was that she couldn't immediately dismiss their accusations. She'd seen enough over the past 2 months to know that Victor's business operated in moral gray areas, that he made decisions that prioritized profit and power over strict legal compliance. But she'd also seen his vulnerability, his loneliness, the way he looked at her like she was something precious he was afraid to break. She'd felt safe with him, valued, seen in ways she'd never experienced before. How could both things be true? How could the man who held her at night, who spoke about his dead wife with such pain, who'd given her brother a chance at life, how could that man also be someone who hurt people, who built an empire on illegal activities? Elena's phone buzzed. Victor, where are you? We were supposed to meet an hour ago. Her hands shook as she typed a response. Sorry, something came up. Can we reschedule? Are you all right? You sound off. Even through text he could read her. That was the problem. They'd become so attuned to each other that hiding anything felt impossible. Just tired? Long day? Come to the penthouse. Let me take care of you. 6 weeks ago, that invitation would have thrilled her. Now it felt like a trap, a test she was destined to fail. But Elena couldn't refuse without raising suspicion, and she needed time to think, to figure out what she was going to do. "Give me an hour," she typed. Victor was waiting when she arrived, concern evident in his expression. He pulled her into his arms immediately, and Elena had to fight the urge to break down completely. "What happened?" he asked, his hands running soothingly down her back. "Nothing. Everything. I don't know." Elena pulled away, moving to the windows. She couldn't think clearly when he touched her. "Victor, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. All right?" His tone became cautious. "The Caldwell Group. The audit found serious irregularities. Cash transactions that suggest money laundering, clients with questionable backgrounds. I told you we should walk away, but you want to proceed anyway. Why?" Victor was silent for a long moment. "Because the business opportunity outweighs the risks." "That's not an answer, that's corporate speak." Elena turned to face him. "I need the truth. What are we really getting involved in? Elena, are they laundering money? Are we going to be helping them hide illegal funds?" Her voice rose with each question. "Because if that's what this is, I can't be part of it. I won't." Victor's expression hardened, the vulnerable man disappearing behind the calculating businessman. "You're asking me to explain things you're better off not knowing. Things that, once you know them, make you complicit. I'm already complicit. I did the audit, I wrote the report, I'm part of the deal team. The only question is whether I'm complicit knowingly or unknowingly. Unknowingly is safer." "I don't want safe." Elena's voice cracked. "I want the truth. You promised me honesty, Victor. You said that was what made us different, what made this real. So tell me the truth." Victor walked to the bar, poured himself a drink, downed it in one swallow. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "The Caldwell Group has clients who need discreet financial services. Some of those clients operate in legal gray areas. Some operate outside the law entirely. By partnering with Caldwell, we gain access to their network, their infrastructure, their relationships. Yes, some of that involves moving money in ways that obscure its origins. But we're not doing anything illegal. We're providing legitimate financial services to clients whose activities we don't control or question. That's semantics. We'd be enabling illegal activities, even if we're not directly participating in them. Welcome to corporate America, Elena. Do you think any major financial institution has completely clean hands? They all have clients whose money comes from questionable sources. The only difference is how carefully they maintain plausible deniability." Elena felt tears burning behind her eyes. "I thought you were different. I thought—" She stopped, unable to finish. Victor set down his glass and moved toward her, but Elena held up a hand, stopping him. "Don't. Please don't touch me right now. I can't think when you do. What is this really about?" Victor's voice sharpened with suspicion. "You've known for weeks that my business operates in complicated spaces. Why is this suddenly a crisis?" Elena's mind raced. She couldn't tell him about the FBI. That would be obstruction of justice. And besides, she needed time to figure out her next move. But she also couldn't lie convincingly to someone who knew her so well. "Because it's one thing to know abstractly that your business involves moral compromises," she said carefully. "It's another to be actively participating in a deal that I know will be used for illegal purposes. That makes me culpable in a way I can't justify to myself." Victor studied her face with that unnerving intensity. "There's something you're not telling me. There are a lot of things we don't tell each other, Victor. That's the foundation of your entire world. Strategic omissions, careful truths, information as currency." Elena grabbed her purse, suddenly desperate to leave. "I need to go. I need to think." "Elena, wait." Victor caught her arm gently. "I know this is difficult. I know I'm asking you to compromise values that matter to you, but I also need you to understand something. You're in this now. You've seen things, know things that make you valuable to people who might want to hurt me. Walking away doesn't make you innocent or safe. It just makes you vulnerable." The words hit Elena like ice water. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm warning you. There's a difference." His grip on her arm tightened slightly. "I care about you, Elena. More than I should, more than is wise. But caring about you doesn't change the reality of the world we're operating in. If you walk away, I can't protect you. And there are people who would very much like to know what you know." Elena pulled her arm free, her heart hammering with fear and anger and a desperate sadness. "So what? I'm trapped? I either stay and become complicit in activities I find morally reprehensible, or I leave and become a target. I'm saying the choice was made the moment you accepted my job offer, the moment you walked into my world. Victor's expression held genuine regret. I tried to warn you. I told you it was complicated, that there would be things you'd have to accept. But you chose to stay anyway. I chose to stay because I trusted you, because I believed you when you said you valued honesty and integrity, because I thought, Elena's voice broke, I thought what we had was real. It is real. My feelings for you, your value to my organization, the respect I have for your mind, all of that is completely real. Victor moved closer, his voice dropping to something more intimate. But real doesn't mean simple, Elena. It doesn't mean easy. It means navigating complexity together, making difficult choices, accepting that sometimes there are no perfect answers. Elena wanted to believe him, wanted to fall into his arms and let him convince her that everything would be all right, that they could find a way through this together. But Agent Walsh's words echoed in her mind. People around him have accidents. I need time, Elena repeated, moving toward the door. Please, Victor, just give me some space to figure this out. He didn't try to stop her again, but his voice followed her to the door. 48 hours, Elena. Then I need to know if you're with me or against me, because in my world, there's no middle ground. Elena spent the next 2 days in agony, barely sleeping, unable to eat, her mind constantly spinning through impossible scenarios. She visited Carlos in the hospital. He was healing beautifully from his surgery, full of life and hope, and nearly broke down at the sight of him. Everything good in her life right now came from Victor. Her brother's health, her career, her financial security. How could she betray the man who'd given her all of that? But how could she not? The FBI had evidence of illegal activities. People had been hurt, possibly worse, by Victor's organization. And if she helped him, if she stayed silent, she'd be complicit in whatever came next. On the morning of the second day, Elena made her decision. She called Agent Walsh's number, her hand shaking so badly she almost dropped the phone. I'll cooperate, but I have conditions. We're listening. My brother, he gets protected too. Full security, new identity if necessary. And I need your word that you'll move quickly. I can't do this for months pretending everything's normal while gathering evidence. It would destroy me. We can work with that. Come in this afternoon. We'll wire you up, brief you on what we need. With your access and cooperation, we could have enough for an arrest warrant within 2 weeks. 2 weeks. 14 days of lying to Victor, of betraying his trust, of gathering evidence that would dismantle everything he'd built and likely send him to prison. Elena thought about that first night in the restaurant, when Victor had looked at her and seen possibility instead of invisibility. She thought about late nights working together, his patient teaching, the way he'd opened up about his wife. She thought about the first time he'd kissed her, the vulnerability in his eyes when he admitted he cared for her. Then she thought about the people he'd hurt, the illegal activities he'd enabled, the future crimes he would commit if someone didn't stop him. I'll be there at 3, Elena said, and ended the call before she could change her mind. That evening, Elena went to the office as usual, wearing a wire taped to her skin beneath her blouse. The FBI agents had been thorough in their briefing, ask open-ended questions, get Victor to discuss specific deals, try to get him to admit knowledge of illegal activities. Victor was in his office reviewing documents. He looked up when she entered, and his expression immediately showed concern. You look terrible. Did you sleep at all? Not much. Elena forced herself to move closer, to act normal despite the wire recording every word. I've been thinking about what you said, about being in this world, about there being no middle ground. And? Victor set aside his documents, giving her his full attention. And I need to understand more about what we're really doing, what the Caldwell deal means, what you expect from me going forward. Elena sat across from him, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. No more vague answers or strategic omissions. If I'm going to stay, I need complete honesty. Victor studied her for a long moment, and Elena felt certain he could see right through her, could sense the deception. But finally he nodded. All right, complete honesty. What do you want to know? And as Elena began asking the questions that would seal Victor's fate, she felt something inside her breaking, the last remnants of the naive woman who'd walked into that restaurant 2 months ago, who'd believed that talent and hard work were enough, who'd thought she could enter Victor's world without losing pieces of herself along the way. She was crossing a line from which there would be no return. And the worst part was that she still wasn't entirely sure it was the right choice, but it was the only choice she could live with. And sometimes, Elena was learning, that was all you got. Not the right answer, not the perfect solution, just the least terrible option in a world where every choice came with a price. The recording device captured everything, and with each answer Victor gave, each admission of knowledge, each detail of illegal activities, Elena felt the distance between them growing, felt the relationship they'd built crumbling into evidence and testimony and betrayal. This was the price of truth. This was what it cost to choose integrity over love, justice over loyalty, what was right over what felt right. And as Elena asked her final question and received Victor's damning answer, she wondered if she'd ever forgive herself for what she was about to do.